Hello, hello, hello. I am your host, Tracy Otsuka. Thank you so much for joining me here for another episode of ADHD for Smartass Women. You know that my purpose is to show you who you are and then inspire you to be it. In the thousands of ADHD women that I've had the privilege of meeting, I've never met not one, that wasn't truly brilliant at something. And so, of course, I am just delighted to introduce you to Nicole Stanley. Nicole Stanley is a powerhouse money coach and the founder of Arise Financial Coaching, where she's on a mission to make financial freedom accessible and shame free, especially for women who've been told that they're bad with money. A Latina entrepreneur and personal finance expert, Nicole didn't just study money, she mastered it. After paying off significant debt and building her family's net worth through investing, she realized that wealth isn't just about numbers. It's about confidence, choices, and breaking cycles. Now she's helping other women do the same. Through Arise Financial Coaching, Nicole has helped hundreds of women and couples get out of debt, start saving, and take control of their finances without guilt, overwhelm, or boring budgeting lectures. Yahoo! Her expertise has been featured on Good Morning America, Business Insider, Time, ABC News, and more. Nicole believes that when women understand money, they change their lives, they change their communities. Today, she's here to show us how. Welcome, Nicole, and did I get all of that right?
Goodness gracious, yes. Tracy, I'm so happy to be here. I'm a longtime listener, so I cannot wait to talk about all things money and ADHD. I'm going to talk your ear off.
Wonderful. We love that. So then if you're a longtime listener, you know how we roll here. We always want to hear your ADHD story first. I think that helps our audience connect to you, and it certainly helps me connect to you. So can you share how you were diagnosed, what the circumstances were?
Yeah, so I found out officially that I had ADHD last year, roughly, yeah, 1 year ago in February in 2024. I started to do research more about ADHD when I started to, I have three children, and my oldest daughter, let's just say she is just like me as a kid. And I did a lot of Googling for a long time of how to best parent her. And as I was doing that research, I learned a lot about what ADHD looks like in young girls. And when I was reading everything, I'm like, well, that was me. That was me. That was me. What do you mean? No, that's normal, right? And then starting to talk with my husband and, him being like, well, actually, no, it wasn't like that for me. My husband is the most neurotypical person that has ever existed. And so through doing that research, I had been going to therapy already for a pretty long time. I struggled a lot with postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, and kind of through the process started to wonder, was I actually misdiagnosed? I really identify with all of these ADHD symptoms, and they've been present my whole life. As a kid, teachers often called me a space cadet, or, I often had my own table for talking too much, or right? Like all of that classic ADHD stuff. So I decided that I really wanted to know. So I found a place that I could go get an evaluation. And it was a doctor who didn't prescribe meds or anything. He did like these long 6-hour evaluations in person. And I was like, I really want to know for sure. So last year I went in, and it was a 6-hour long thing. And I remember thinking, like, okay, I am doing this. They did an attention test, they did all this stuff. And at the end of the evaluation, I looked at him and I go, okay, how'd I do? And he kind of looks at me with his face and he's like, I think you know. And I was like, well, okay, how bad is it though? Right. And he says, well, let me show you the data. And he pulled up in this, my results. And he said, so to give you an idea, if I was to line up 100 women with ADHD, from the least ADHD to the most ADHD, the most being 100, you would be number 99. And I started laughing and then I started crying because obviously it made so much make sense to me about my life and how I worked, and even just struggles that my husband and I had. And it was very, very validating, but also just different, right? To start to look through the lens of my life a little differently. And yeah, so since then, I have been learning. That's when I started listening to your podcast and learning a lot about myself as a business owner, a mom, a wife, really even as a friend. And it's been so impactful, mostly positive, 10% negative in my personal view of how I work and how my brain works.
So, what's the 10% negative?
So I think that before I knew I had ADHD, I held myself to the same standards as those around me. Like I really mask really, really high. And I think that sometimes that helped me just because I didn't know why something would be hard. So I could just commit and just be like, I'm just going to do this. And even if it was 20 times harder than those around me, I was so concerned with appearing that I had it all together that I would just kind of perform at 90% or, 100%, where now I can more easily look at a task and say, I don't actually think that's going to be the best thing for me to set myself up with or for me to say yes to, which I think is a good thing most of the time. But there is still that part of me that wonders, could I maybe grit through a little more? But I have way less stress. So I think overall it's a net benefit.
I think I misunderstood your comment. So, what you're saying is that when you look at your ADHD now, 90% of it actually helps you move your life forward in a way that works for you. The other 10% is the part that kind of trips you up at times.
Yeah, like where I'll be aware, I'm like, man, I could perform better, right, at this or that. And I mean, we all have weaknesses. So I think it's kind of an unrealistic expectation for me to say, well, I could be 100% at everything because nobody is.
And the reason why you struggle with that 10% is exactly why you're brilliant at the 90%, right?
Right, right.
Or maybe you're not brilliant at 90.
I'm brilliant at like 20.
Which, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. And so pretty much the goal is to figure out, okay, how can I expand on that 20% and be more in that 20%, right? As far as the number of hours in the day versus you only get to be in that 20% of the day.
Yes, exactly.
When you talk about the doctor saying you're number 99 out of 100 in terms of the degree of your symptoms, what symptoms was he talking about? Or I guess the better question is, what were the symptoms that you struggled with?
I think that I noticed for me, I had always been the girl who was really busy, very overwhelmed. I was very social and I struggled in school. Struggled a lot with some of my friendships too growing up, where I was very present to people when I was with them and we were having fun. And I was the girl who forgot about your birthday and forgot to ask about how your mom was doing when you told me she was sick. And, I heard a lot of people that way that were close friends of mine. And I didn't really understand why I wasn't that good of a friend. But I struggled in school and I kind of made my way through it by a lot of all-nighters, a lot of, just accepting that in class they would be talking and I would be like, I'm here, I'm listening, and also I'm now thinking about something else and I missed this entire thing and just saying, well, okay, I will just figure it out tonight before the test. And so I kind of always knew that about myself. And I think that when I got married and had children, those symptoms really became more prevalent. They were kind of funny when I was younger, like, oh, I forget my homework and I'm not listening in class or I'm getting in a little fight with a friend. But then when you have kids and you're feeding them, you're cleaning up after them. I was a stay-at-home mom because I really believed like, oh, that's what I'm going to want to do. I'm going to want to be a stay-at-home mom. But there's so much follow-through required in being a stay-at-home mother, a lot of details. And what it really ended up spiraling for me was all of these details, all of the balls that I was dropping, my self-confidence really plummeting. I think ADHD can affect your self-confidence. But then when you tackle on mom guilt, when you don't know you have ADHD, you're just like, I am just a horrible, horrible mom, right? And I think that leads to a lot of other things.
Absolutely. If that is what you are doing exclusively, you can't compare it to the things you're brilliant at. I could see how that would really, like, you'd really be beating yourself up because, I mean, we're sold a bill of goods here, right? Where, you're a full time mom and everything is perfect. And there are some parts of full-time momhood that are really fun and great, but there's a lot of slogging through. Groundhog Day, it never ends. It's just boring stuff to our brain. So at what point did you say, okay, screw this full-time mom thing, I need something more?
Yeah, I think that it's funny because I'm grateful for the slow journey of entrepreneurship that was kind of thrust onto me. And it was really the beginning. Like, I would say that if I didn't become an entrepreneur, I wouldn't have found out that I had ADHD because I was just kind of stuck in this low confidence cycle as a mom where I was just like, well, I'm just kind of not this good at this, but this is what is, obviously our families matter to us. So it's like, this is what I'm going to thrive. I'm going to do good at this. I got to figure out how to do good at this. And when I started my business, it was kind of not on accident, but my husband was a youth minister at the time. And that meant we were not rolling in the big money, right? We were struggling. We were making, under what was average at the time in America. I was stay at home and I was doing a bunch of odd jobs because I was a personal finance nerd. And part of that goes back to some anxiety I had growing up. But I was like, if we make a little bit of money, I want to do good with it because that will allow me more freedom, more security in life. So I was just kind of helping people on the side, helping people with their budgets because I just never shut up about money. I was like, I liked goal setting with people. I liked helping them make a budget because, I really got to see autonomy light up in someone. But I did not know financial coaching was an industry, that it was a job I could do. So I wrote about money on the internet. And I remember in 2020, my husband got furloughed as a youth minister, which our sole income was that. Other than my odd jobs, I like nannied and I taught English online, anything I could do to help us with a little extra money. And we kind of looked at each other from across the table and said, well, what if you charge someone? What if you decided to charge someone? I studied business in college. And so I'm like, I think I could figure this out. And so I put my head down and like, how can I start a business? How can I, package this product, this, blah, blah, blah. And what I realized through that journey was all of the things that I thought about me made me a bad student, that made me not smart, were actually assets that I didn't know how to use yet. And so I remember after my first year, I had like my first launch and I got 25 clients and it was a really big deal. And I remember crying to my husband that year on New Year's. It's like so emotional thinking about it because as a kid, you're just told you are not as smart as other kids. You don't get as good of grades. You're this, you're that. And my father, loved me, but he was an engineer, which meant I wasn't smart his way. So like I really internalized that. When I launched a business, it had all the right ingredients for what I didn't know was my ADHD at that time, but was my brain, right? And so I remember just being like, Jake, my husband, I feel like I'm finally doing what makes me feel so successful, so happy, so engaged. And, I just listened to what other people said growing up, where it was like, oh, you never start your own business. That's too risky. That's too, you want to just get a safe job. And then I realized that it was actually that risk that made it so much fun. It was what made it keeping me engaged. And so I ended up growing, my business has grown 30 to 50% every year since I started in 2020. I now serve almost 100 active clients, have helped hundreds of people, and now have 2 full-time employees. And I look at that as such a great example of how, ADHD can be framed as something that makes you not as good, but it also means you have a superpower and you have skills that maybe neurotypical people can't tap into as easily as you can. And I really look at that time when I launched my business as, I was nursing. I had a 3-month-old son, my second, and I was up at 5 a.m. and I was going to bed at 1 every night working to build this business because because my brain was hyper focused on it and it paid off. Like, I mean, I look at that time and I'm like, well, even though I didn't know I had ADHD, it was still kind of the backbone of a big change for me. And now I feel that I enjoy motherhood. I still have some of those same, obviously, insecurities as a mom where I'm like, well, I'm An example is like, moms who do a bunch of crafts with their kids. I cannot do crafts with children. It's just like, it's so messy. There are so many details. I've got a toddler, I have a 1-year old, a 5-year old, a 7-year old. It's just so messy. And like, I used to just be like, well, I think I'm a bad mom. Where now I'm like, actually, it's too much detail. It's too much detail for me. So no crafts. I'm not the craft mom, right? I'm a dance party mom. I'm a go outside and play football mom. I am not a craft mom, and that's okay. But because I get to spend more of my time or some of my time in my day instead of being just full-time stay at home, engaging my brain with a challenge and something competitive, I really feel like I get to show up more as the mom I wanted to be when I was stay at home, but sadly just didn't work for my brain.
And I suspect that you doing what you love also gives you a lot more disposable income to get help around the things around the house that
Yes.
you don't love and you're not particularly good at.
It's true. It's true. That was a really big thing. And I felt really bad at the beginning of my financial journey. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, how much of my postpartum depression could I outsource? Like, how much of it was actually a financial problem, right? That I needed to figure out how to fix or figure out a solution to, which is really kind of the heart of what I believe now that I didn't know then, which is, every financial problem is fixable. Money is just about choices that you get to have in your life, and you get to choose what you use it towards, what you don't, what you prioritize. And that I think is a really big part of why people feel a lot of stress when it comes to money, is because they don't feel that control.
Okay, so before we go to what you're doing now, I want to go back to money. Has money always been your extreme interest?
No.
Ah, okay, talk about that. Because that gives us hope. Because I'm thinking, well, she's not one of us. I guess you were.
No, yeah, in full transparency, so I grew up in a Puerto Rican American family, and my dad came stateside, which I know is not an immigrant story because Puerto Rico is a part of America, but they view it really that way. My dad would always say, I came stateside with $20 in my pocket and a baby, and I had to get a pay advance on my first paycheck because Natalie needed diapers. That's my older sister, and whatever. And so my dad is a really big inspiration to me because I saw him work really hard to give us a better life. He was a software engineer, and I saw kind of the progression of how he was doing very well financially with his job, but behind closed doors, our family was extremely stressed about money. And some of that was more around my parents, internal issues together. But I learned at a young age that making more money didn't necessarily mean more security. And so my dad spent time, really trying to tell me that I needed to become a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer. Those are the three options. And there was no other option, right? And he's like, this is what you have to do. And spoiler alert, when I met my husband, it was not the ideal situation for what my dad had hoped for me, because I fell in love very young. I got married really young. We were in debt when we got married. My husband, when we met, he was making 24,000 a year the year that we got engaged. My dad spent time driving me through like the slums where I lived in Tallahassee. And he's like, if you marry him, you're going to live here. And it was a really big, and my dad gave his blessing, but he was stingy with it. Okay. He was really, really stingy with it. And I was young and I said, Dad, money doesn't matter. It's okay. He wants to be a youth minister. It's fine. We'll be poor. It'll be cool. Right. And I really had this kind of, I'm going to prove you wrong energy when I got married so young. We look at pictures and we're like, oh my God, we were like teenagers.
How old were you, Nicole?
I was 22. I was freshly 22. Okay. But, I'm engaged at 21. I'm still in college. Okay. But best decision of my life. Luckily, I married the right person.
Did you meet your husband in college?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So we met each other in college and we dated long distance. And then he moved to Florida to see, I tricked him and I got the ring. It was great. So he was the right character. And I knew that. I knew that going into the marriage, and I'm thankful. But so when we started planning our wedding, I was somebody who never identified as, anxious or super, super stressed. But I tried to kind of keep my financial stress to myself. I didn't want my dad to know that I was stressed about money. And so, because he was gonna really, lay it down, the law. And I just remember having my first panic attack while we were planning our wedding budget. And I remember the day, it was in, the spring when I'm in college, and I'm sitting there with Jake and I'm doing the numbers over and over again for our wedding. And I'm like, they're just not adding up.
Are you paying for your own wedding? Is that what?
My parents gave a sum and then his parents gave a sum, but it was, to give you an idea, at the time, those two sums together were a third of what the average wedding costs in America. So we were like, well, we're going to make it work on this budget, right? We're going to put this together. We're going to put like 2,000 of our own dollars in there, which for us was like a fourth of our bank account. And we were like, we're going to figure it out. And so I remember looking at him and saying, if we can't afford this wedding where our friends are doing the cake, our friends are doing the flowers, they're pouring the beers, how the hell are we going to afford a life together? And we kind of looked at each other and we're like, we just have to figure this out. And so we enrolled in our first personal finance course at that time. And I consider that a really big catalyst because for the first time in my life, I saw that if I could learn enough about money, then I could have some autonomy over my life, right? Like I kind of grew up watching my dad say the American dream was dead and that you could never really trust what was going to happen, right? And he also was very worried about retirement. So I really internalized a lot of that stress. And so when I learned, like, wow, what if I started investing young, right? What if I prioritize this in my early 20s? What could happen, right? So we became crazy for the personal finance world. Like, we sold stuff on Facebook Marketplace. We were like the frugality people. And I look back at that time and I kind of feel bad for her because she was, very stressed still about money. But one of the main things we did is we had said, okay, we had $30,000 in debt. We're going to pay this off as fast as possible. So I took a commission job.
Was most of that 30,000 from the wedding?
Oh, no, no. We went into no debt over the wedding. Most of it was my husband's student debt.
Student debt. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And then some of it was a car debt. But we decided, okay, we're going to prioritize this. And so I took a commission job and I spent that first year of our marriage really in my opinion, kind of a personal hell. Like we fought about money constantly. I was very stressed. And I'm sure you can see the correlation, right? My dad, me, like all of it working together. And the things that started during that time were I started going to therapy, which made me uncover quite a bit of kind of all the things I was bringing in bringing into my new marriage, but also, a little more self-kindness, a little bit less rigidity in things. And that's a part of too me finding out that I had ADHD. We kind of got united behind this goal of we're going to pay off our debt and see what happens. And so we paid off our first $30,000 worth of debt in 10 months together on an average annual salary of $56,000 a year. And then after we paid off that debt, I worked in youth ministry for about 10 months till I had my first child and I quit so I could stay home. And then we just prioritized investing for the next few years. So we did a live and flip. We started investing a few $100s a month. I remember going and interviewing financial advisors and them laughing at us because we were just these kind of like young, messy kids with a baby. And we're like, we're coming in to start investing $100, a month. And they laughed at us. And I remember feeling like, I don't care. I'm going to do this, right? So fast forward, by age 27, we hit a financial goal, which is called Coast Fire. I don't know. Are you familiar with that at all? So Coast Fire is when you invest enough money in your own retirement that even if you never invest another dollar, you will still retire a multimillionaire. And we hit that at age 27, which is $100,000 invested. And that was like this weight off my shoulders. When I say, Tracy, that I walked around with the weight of kind of my father's stress over his retirement,
Yeah.
I really did. Like I felt that because I felt that the markets could change and things did change, right? Look what happened in 2020. Like things changed, but I knew that my financial foundation that I had prioritized was a very big part of lowering my stress. And so that was when I kind of naturally started helping people with money before I knew, and then ended up launching my business a few years later. But, I share that story because it was really my stress about money that pushed me to this hyper focus of I'm going to figure this out, which then kind of made me realize, okay, now that this is more secure in my life, what like naturally helping other people to start doing that. So it wasn't like I was in a financial industry before it. I feel like a different level of dopamine when I see someone start to feel less stressed about their money because I know how all encompassing that can be. For me, my memory of my wedding day was I cried the day before because of a financial inconvenience. So I'm on the plane going to my wedding crying because of financial stuff. And that was, there's so many wake up calls like that where I'm like, I don't want money to play this role in my life.
Yeah. Was your husband as stressed as you were about money?
No.
No. Was he like, what is going on?
Well, it's funny because we grew up in different types of households. So my family was very money vigilant, also very money scarcity mentality. So they talked about money all the time. I mean, still, my parents, we never shut up. They never shut up about money. It's like you walk by a house, I wonder how much that costs. Like all that stuff, right? And then his family was the other side of that. So they're very money avoidant. They never talk about it. It's just not a thing you talk about. And so when we came together, we noticed, oh, we have a very different approach on this. And neither one of us said, I think mine's the best. Both of us were aware that we were like, we kind of don't think either way is the way we want. We asked that question when we first took our first class together of, okay, what's the family culture we are going to have? Because it's got to be somewhere in between.
It also sounds like your stress and anxiety around money was also making you physically ill.
It was. Yeah.
Becoming a money coach sounds like it was just a natural offshoot from you figuring out your own money situation, then starting, I'm assuming you were talking about it with your friends and you would help your friends. And so it was just a natural outgrowth of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, it was almost like just a passion project that grew out of, I consider, not a little bratty energy, but very, I'm going to prove you wrong energy when I was like, okay, we're not making a lot of money. I got to figure out how to do this. I wanted to kind of show my dad, like, we can do this. And then through that, right, like I had a lot of friends who maybe made more than me or they had more, and they're like, well, you guys are out here doing it. How did you do it? And I'm like, well, let's figure it out together, right? And I think it's funny because you know how people with ADHD, we love like getting into the nitty gritty, like drama with people, like what's interesting. And I loved it because I was like, I am such a nosy ass bitch. Like getting to talk to people about their money, I get to like hear what's really going on, what's really stressing them out. And
So intimate. Money is probably, I think it's almost more intimate than talking about sex.
statistically, it is, Tracy. Statistically, it is.
And there's so much shame around if you feel like you're not where you should be, if you're not doing it right. I've told this story before. A couple of years ago, one of the biggest American business magazines contacted me. It was right around right before my book came out. And they wanted to write an article about ADHD and money. And I met with, one of their financial journalists who I loved, by the way. She suspected she might have ADHD, and we just had the best conversation. And I really felt when I walked away that she got me. And of course, I was super grateful for the opportunity, all of that. It's all good. You can never have good press or too much press. But once the article came out, and the article just featured me, but out of like 10 recommendations, I think she took 2 of them. The rest was the same old traditional advice: how to budget, how to save, how to track, how to use willpower to control spending. And I remember feeling so disappointed because it was the same old tired advice. And this was supposed to be an article about money and ADHD and, the ADHD brain. Same tired old advice that did not work for the ADHD brain, certainly didn't work for me. And so what I want to start with is, why does traditional money advice, the budgets, the spreadsheets, the tracking, why is that so hard for ADHD brains to follow?
Yeah. Well, I think that it's funny you bring that up because when I started talking about, my journey and I didn't know I had ADHD, I was talking about these things that were so revolutionary to me, but I didn't realize why they were so revolutionary to me. And it's exactly what you're talking about in the sense that, classic financial advice revolves around self restriction, number one, insane attention to detail, right? And it also revolves around a amount of follow through, right? Which is, tiny but things that you do over and over and over again to be successful, right? That's what the traditional advice is around, which all three of those things are things that the ADHD brain struggles with, right? It is very difficult for us to follow very strict details, step by step details. It's very difficult for us to be motivated by shoulds, right? Oh, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. Well, I don't care, right? Like that's kind of the ADHD brain is literally wired to be a hunter, right? I don't know if you've read the book Hunters in a Farmer's World. That was one of the first books I read when I got diagnosed. And when you think about it, right, if we are hunters, we're looking for a challenge, we're looking for the payoff, we're looking for, that big prize.
Yeah.
When you're budgeting like the traditional way and it's like, well, why don't you cut 20% out of your meat budget? It's like the ADHD brain isn't even listening the third word you get to in that sentence because it's so incredibly boring. And so I think that when you kind of look at money in the way that it's typically taught, it's just going to glaze over the ADHD mind. And so one of the things that I found to be very helpful for myself that, turned to be helpful not just for ADHD, because yes, I have a lot of clients who have ADHD, but even the neurotypical person, because, 80% of people in America don't budget. And the reason is because it's boring as hell. Like, nobody wants to go through, especially if you have ADHD, and categorize every expense you have. Good God, how annoying is that, right? And this was one of the first things that when I kind of created my own, well, I did create my own budget system, was like, okay, how can I never look at another budget spreadsheet again? How can I never look at another tracker again? How can I never have to like categorize an expense into one of 36 different categories, right? This is what people think about when they think about financial freedom, right? Is they think that they're going to sit down and somebody's going to say, well, let's look at your stupid budget tracker. And it's like, well, somebody kill me. Like literally somebody kill me. So I think that one, if we can help to reframe the way managing your money looks like for the person with ADHD, you're going to get a different result. And so if you can start to, I mean, I'm going straight into advice, but for those of you who struggle with managing your money, I want you to forget about everything you've been told about what you should do. Don't look at another budget app. I want you to look at ways to start to infuse dopamine into your experience with money. And so that can look like a variety of different things, right? Something could be, something I do with clients is I never teach anyone to underestimate any bills, right? So whenever we budget for anything, we always, estimate for the highest because what it does is when you check in to how you did later, it gives you a little shot of dopamine because you have extra money, right? And what does that begin to do? It starts to go down that neuro pathway of, oh, managing my money can be positive. Like this can make me feel good. Another way that you could start to do that is like I set like dopamine rewards connected to financial goals. So it's not just like, oh, I want to get to this amount in savings. It's like, I am going to buy myself a spa day if I get to my emergency fund by, 60, whatever the goal is, right? I've realized, those are things that you would think, oh, they don't teach you to do that. You shouldn't spend money when you're trying to hit a financial goal. But if you can look at the things that work for your ADHD and start to build that into your financial goal setting, you're going to notice like this becomes more fun. It becomes a game. You get to hunt, right? Like that's really what ADHD we often like to do is we're hunting for something exciting, something fun. And so if you can begin to change something that is traditionally not very sexy, like investing in your retirement, right? And change the way you package it, change the way you track it, and make it more of a game and something that feels more, sexy. Like, so for me, I don't think about retirement. I think about financial independence, which is a statement, right? It's like, I don't have to work anymore for my money. Like, that is cool as heck, right? All of a sudden, I'm now really driven to get to that goal. And it's just a rebranding, right? Of something that works for my brain. Um, and everybody kind of has different things. I think about, financial goals and financial advice has long been thought of as a manual that everybody has to follow in the exact same way, in the exact same order. And if you were to think about your financially free life more like a vacation, right? So let's pretend like you were planning a vacation to Paris. Yes, you could look at a travel book, and that travel book might say, day 1, Eiffel Tower. Day 2, go get a crepe. Day 3, go do this, right? But if you're not interested in whatever the itinerary is, if you don't feel excited about it, the ADHD girly just doesn't show up. Like, I'm not going to show up, right? And also, we have this like perfectionism with ADHD too, where it's like, well, if I didn't do it the right way, then I probably just should not do it at all. When if you can start to give yourself that permission of my financial freedom journey, or what it looks like for me to get there, it's gonna look like this type of journey because it excites me the most. It's as long as you're going on the stupid trip, right? You've got a financial goal, you work towards that goal, whether it's debt, savings, whatever, and you're moving forward, then that's what it takes to keep the ADHD brain engaged versus saying, well, do it like this and do it perfectly, or just why do it at all, right?
I have the kind of brain that if I want to go do a spa day, which I never will, but if I did, so let's say there's some reward I give myself, yes, I will just go do it. It's never even a thought that, oh, well, down the road, if I do these things, then I'm going to get this bonus. It almost has to be for me that it's so different and creative and fun. So let me give you an example. My favorite hack that I have that I started 2.5 years ago is for years. So my husband's a banker. So I didn't really have to worry about what's happening next because he did it and he's just much better at it than I am, like by a mile. But I started to feel like this is terrible. What if something happens to him? It's just when you don't know how to manage money, it's just something that you can do everything else in the world. It still feels like there's something wrong. And so I just thought about, okay, well, the way my brain works is it's got to be fun and it's got to be creative. And so why are we doing all this budgeting, scheduling, all this painful stuff? It is so we invest our money and we have our money work for us.
Mm-hmm.
So I finally figured out after years how to just automate investing, not saving. So I use this simple app called Acorn. It's nothing, special. You can use anything that works, but it was so simple and I could actually do it. And I just started every single week investing a certain amount of money. And then when I would get bigger sums of money, I would invest more. And I am telling you, I don't do it daily, but I do it at least once a week. I forget. What I'm doing is I'm using what my brain does best, which is forget stuff. I totally forget I'm doing it, but every once in a while, I'm looking at my phone and I see the Acorn app and I'm like, "Oh, well, how much do I have now?" I click on it and I'm not doing anything. I don't miss the money. I've forgotten I'm doing it, but it really provides dopamine because I've hacked how to do what all of this investing and saving and all this stuff, all these things that we're supposed to be doing. I've done it in a way that works for me. So I'm curious, do you have any really creative, different money strategies that you have found work especially well for the ADHD brains? Something beyond like, oh, you have to stick to a budget. You have to save, a certain amount. You have to deny yourself this because I'm just never going to do that.
Yeah. And I think that, Tracy, your example is the perfect example because, I mean, one, praise that your husband is so good at kind of planning things out. I know for many women with ADHD, they can feel very bad with money if they don't have some of those structures set up yet. And so your example of giving, setting up acorns and starting to put in more in there is all because of that, solid foundation that you have. And I think that's where most ADHD women get stuck, is that they don't have that system that allows them the freedom. And so you talking about what it's like now is like the end of what somebody who prioritizes setting up an automated system for their money, what's on the other side of that. And I think that that's the best thing to be talking about for ADHD women is, yes, if you are an ADHD woman, man, you have to set up automated ways to budget, right? And what that means is a budget is just a unsexy word for telling your money what to do. So our system is really around a visual, which is another thing for ADHD, because if you don't have a visual way to see where you're at, and most people say, oh, I budget in my head, or I have an idea of where things should go, that's never going to work for us. We don't have an idea. We don't know. We won't remember ever, right? And so I say, let's stop pretending that we're going to remember. Let's stop putting things on our to-do list, and let's automate everything that has ever existed when it comes to your money. And so we do a very simple part of that is we have 3 accounts. I usually don't go into this much detail. So you are lucky listening to this podcast because this is usually behind the paywall, but let's just open it up for you, okay? Is we have 3 checking accounts where one receives all your income all month. And that's the only one I really want you to care about, because you always end up a lot of times with more money, right? Which makes it fun to look at it and to check in and be like, oh, well, I got this return, or I did this, and I got, my grandmother wrote me a check for $100 for my birthday, right? Like all extra money goes into that account. And then what happens is it just fills all month. And then every month there are a set of automations that happen, right? So that your visual plan for your money is set up without you being beholden to a spreadsheet, being beholden to like some weird coloring thing that you're doing to track everything. And you have one financial goal. That's it, one at a time. And you are using all of your extra money towards that one financial goal while you're making sure everything else gets funded. So we have two automations, and one is to your bills account that is automatically connected to all of your bills, both regular and irregular. Like, again, this is the stuff that really trips up the ADHD mind is, how do I track all of this? Start with an audit, have a little financial summit for a weekend. I always tell people, like, would you rather feel like it's hard for the next 20 years, or would you rather have it be hard for the next 2 weeks? Right? So do that audit, figure out what you need to put into that account, automate that so that every single month it goes to the bills account and your bills automatically get paid. Then send your spending to a different account, right? And you're gonna have 2 types of spending. The spending that you do all the time, and it really doesn't matter. Like, you're gonna go to the grocery store, you're gonna get gas, you're gonna go out to eat. You're literally going to do these things every month. And you can pretend that you'd like to spend 200 more here and 200 less here. You're going to spend what you're going to spend on it. So the goal is, let's figure out what that amount is. Let's add 10%. And then let's put that in an account and say, your goal is to not run out of money. If you don't run out of money, you won, right? Then after that, right, you have your little funding to other long midterm goals. So things like vacations, things like Christmas. Now I know you can have all of that be automated. And then you can decide, how much money do I want to put towards my one goal? Your budget routine is checking into that account once a month and saying, okay, I actually have, I plan to have 1,000 more. I have 1,300 more. So my one financial goal is I'm building up my emergency fund, or I am paying off this debt. And you get to do a one file swoop of that $1,000, right? Or that $2,000, $3,000. Our goal for all of our clients is like at least 1,000, or else you're not really getting that dopamine hit. You don't feel like you're moving forward. That, I think, is a lot easier to maintain for the ADHD brain. And it becomes, oh, I'm now investing. Oh, I'm now putting money towards my lifestyle because I paid off all my debt, right? Like, imagine what it'll feel like when you have that organized. And I want every person with ADHD to know that planning out your money or having that system set up, yes, it doesn't happen overnight, right? But you passed high school. You probably went to college. You've done hard things before. And so money, it does not exist as this extra hard thing that people with ADHD cannot do. We have to figure out the right mindset for our particular brain, the right system for our brain, and then get something that can happen even when we aren't motivated, because that's what, modern day automations can do for us, is they can work for us when we're not motivated to budget. And just expect, if you're the ADHD person, you're not going to be motivated every single month. So don't plan on it.
What you're saying is in your program, you help women set up these structures and systems. And once they set up the structure and system, like, how do you help them get there? Because
Well,
I can imagine, okay, this is what I want to do. And then when push comes to shove, yeah, if I have to do it on my own, I'm just never going to do it because there'll always be something that trips me up. So, how do they get there?
yeah. I think that's like the beauty of a coach, right? Like a lot of ADHD people, when we want to do something and we want to do it well, we end up hiring a coach because body doubling works. It's good to have somebody who knows the problems that you're going to overcome. And so the cool thing that we get to tell clients, or anyone really who hires a financial coach, is now you get to offboard some of your financial stress onto someone else. And you get to say, hey, help me figure this out because I'm struggling. And, when you solve the same problems every day, like I always tell people, they'll be like, is it too much debt? And I'm like, I eat credit card debt for breakfast. I love credit card debt because we can do it, right? Every financial problem is fixable. We just need some accountability. We need a system. We need to help you get excited about your, in that same analogy, your trip to Paris, right? Let's make it the best freaking trip ever. And then you're going to be excited to do it. You're going to start to feel confident. And it's like this weird momentum ball where all of a sudden you were that person who said, well, I'm kind of bad with money. And you're like, actually, no, I've got my acorns. I've got my money. I have my automated investments. I am 20% ahead of other people my age in retirement. And therefore I get to stop working at 59 instead of 67. Like that is cool, right? And so I think helping people through that hard administrative part, right? That's often why they work with a coach, right? It's not because they say, oh, there's some magic knowledge that somebody has about money that's unavailable to me. It's like, no, everything about money is available for free online. Look it up. Nothing is secret, right? The only thing that's hard is the gap between what you already know and what you haven't done yet. So just make it happen. You're a hunter anyway. Let's put that towards good use with your financial goals.
So, are you saying that in your program, if you sign up, you are literally basically spoon fed to get that thing done? So, when they sign up, they are literally going to do all of those things.
Yeah, our program promise is that in the first 30 days of our program, we will help you set up an automated system to manage your money that helps you save at least $1,000 or more towards your financial goals without giving up spending on everything you love. And, I know it seems crazy. I'm not saying it's an easy 30 days, okay? But that's the first 30 days. And if you can get through that, you can make a ton of progress. Really, you can. And I always tell people, like, listen, once you sign up with us, I don't want to sound like I'm like selling anyone, but it's like, you can't run, you can't hide. I'm looking at your bills with you. Like I'm in here. I'm looking, we're talking about it. You're filling out an audit of every way that you spend. Like we're going to figure this out. No financial problem is too big to fix.
So, when you have those 3 checking accounts that you set up, are they high yield?
So we do say for your emergency fund and for your irregular spending that you would set up a high yield savings account for those. It's all at the same bank. But checking accounts, you don't need them to be, technically there are high yield checking accounts that you set up as a part of our system, but checkings are not meant to build interest, right? Like even your emergency fund is not your real path to building wealth. I always tell people my goal is to get you as fast as humanly possible over the paying off your high interest debt and getting your starter emergency fund and your system set up, because then you get to spend money on stuff that's fun. Come on, like let's do the stuff you really want to do. So let's get over this hard stuff. You don't have to spend your whole life in this hard place with your money. If you can, it's just one step at a time. And I've truly never seen anyone, right? Even people with multiple 6 figures of high interest debt, with a couple months to a couple years of focus, you can change your financial life. You really can.
Well, and I think the hardest part for us is always making the decision and starting. And then once we make the decision that, okay, this is what I'm going to do, it's actually not that hard.
Correct.
because we're getting dopamine from the fact that we're doing something. We're creating a system to get out of whatever mess we feel that we've created.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that the ADHD mind really, like, it's funny because one side of it is you could say, oh, people with ADHD are really bad with money, which statistically, technically is a little true, right? We have higher rates of debt, we are higher with impulse spending. But I've also seen on the inverse that if you can empower the ADHD mind with money, I mean, we're insane. Like, we are insane. We are the people who, like, we're the buzzer beaters, right? Like, if you look at a lot of these entrepreneurs who are very successful, even billionaires, many of them have ADHD. And it's not because of their ADHD, like, and against that, it's because of it. And so I think that you get to begin to choose which story will be yours that will play out, right? You can be the ADHD person who says, forever, I'm not good with money. Or you can say, I'm actually going to figure out a way to make my ADHD my superpower. And it's going to make me the wealthiest and the most financially free version of myself. And maybe I don't know how to get there yet, but that's just today, right? I can begin to start to learn what that looks like.
Well, and the thing is, if we can set things up, I am telling you, and use our brains to, our advantage, you're going to set it up. You're not even going to miss what, is being moved around and changed. And yet it's going to create a future for you that doesn't cause anxiety. Because I think so much stress and anxiety is around this idea of we're now and not now people. We know we need to, plan in some way for the future, and we're not doing it. And that is anxiety producing.
Correct.
So, do you have one real feel good story about one of your ADHD clients who has had tremendous success since working with you and setting all this up?
I mean, it's funny because most of my, like a really large percentage of them have ADHD. Something that makes me the happiest, because yes, there's a lot of stories of people who've paid off debt, but I don't know why it doesn't like inspire me that much. I know that sounds bad. Like, our average client pays off over 20 grand of debt while we're working it. Like, it's great, right? But what I really like, okay, is I can think of one of my clients, Miriam, who she would not mind if I used her name. She's like, we've worked together for years. And she is someone who before really described herself as very overwhelmed with everything, right? Like, it was like she felt overwhelmed about their savings and overwhelmed about their spending and just always overwhelmed. And after setting up her system, right, and achieving those goals of like, okay, building my emergency fund, like doing all those things, right? What I've really loved seeing for her, okay, is that she now sees the things that happen to her financially that are not happy. She now sees them as things that she can like, she just can solve, if that makes sense, in lieu of saying, this is a reflection of my inability. Like, when she first started, every setback was somehow a projection of her, the way she saw it, where she was really able to take herself aside and say, oh, this is a problem I can solve, right? Like, okay, I'm gonna think through this. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that. Also, I want to move here. I want to move my family. Like, she's gotten a nicer house for her family. She's gotten a different job, right? Like, when she stopped connecting that I am not where I want to be financially, and that's a reflection of the type of person I am, right? Like, that's been, I think, one of the most rewarding stories to see because, yes, she has more savings. Yes, she has less debt. Yes, she, is working a better job, making more money, blah, blah, blah. But it's the confidence and the ability that she feels like I can use money to make the choices I want in life. And that's when I feel as a coach like done, right? Not just the systems, not just the debt, not just, you know what I mean? The how much you make, but do you feel like you are the master of your money in lieu of it dictating to you, right? That's my hope for every person. And whether you have ADHD or not, I know it's possible. It's just going to take a little bit of time to set things up, to learn, but you can do hard things. You can do it.
Well, and it sounds like the confidence she received from learning how to manage her money then flowed into,
Other things.
other things like getting a new, job, or maybe building another career, or, finding a better house. Like there is something about money. I mean, once you master money, that is one of the biggest things, right? Because we can't live without money. And so I think so much of the anxiety for us comes from this sense that, oh, well, I'm not good with money and I'm never going to be able to be good with money. So I'm just kind of hanging on, but I'm doing the same things over and over. So, duh, I'm going to get the same results. Instead of ripping off the band aid, saying, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and then setting it up. Yeah, I can imagine the relief that an ADHD brain would feel knowing they could do that and how that would build their confidence.
Yeah, and our money, it may not be everything, right? But it touches everything.
Yeah.
And so if you have this inherently stressful relationship with money, it is impacting your happiness. It's impacting how you feel about where
Health.
you live, where you work. I mean, I was, like you said, physically sick because of financial stress. We see marriages fall apart, right? There's so much joy to be had in life. And if you have something that touches everything in your life that you don't feel like, I know what I'm doing here, I think that it's worth saying, I think I'm going to figure it out, right? Like, because if this is impacting me this much, I'm gonna find a way to prioritize it. Not meaning I'm gonna sign up for a life of restriction, which
Right.
is the old way
Right.
of budgeting, but rather I'm going to, learn a new skill and see it start to pay off for me, right? I'm gonna start to feel the effects of that.
Which is all positive emotion and dopamine. So it makes sense. It becomes this cycle. Okay, so I'm curious, what do your parents think? Like, what does your dad say now?
My dad is so funny because he definitely did not initially like when I started my business. But it's funny because like I mean, one of the best things about being an entrepreneur is you don't need anybody's belief in you. You just need to go out there with a service or a product that's going to help people and the market rewards you, right? The market, it's not that I had enough belief in myself to make something happen. It's rather if you have a business that helps people and you have a service that does something good, you will get clients, you will make money, you will grow. That it's a natural effect. And so part of that for me was learning, well, I don't actually have to rely on what my parents think about this, right? Because I have a different mission. My mission is, I say this to myself kind of privately, but part of what's so rewarding about my job is that when I grew up, I saw my dad in this place of hopelessness a lot. And I felt stuck there and I felt that stuckness. And when I see people click out of that, that is really for me the personal thing because I get to see somebody click out of that story. Yes, it proves to me that's one path, it's not the only path, and I'm going to go help more people unclick that, right? And I think that's why so much of like what you end up doing as an entrepreneur, if you're an entrepreneur, it comes back to your passion in life and what sometimes also your pain in life. Like really that's a part of it. And I think that's okay to acknowledge. I think one of the sharks on Shark Tank talks about how she prefers to invest in people who have a chip on their shoulder because it's true, our pain can drive us.
Is that Barbara?
Yes, it is Barbara. It is Barbara. But yeah, I would definitely say that that is a part of it for me. And I mean, my dad's happy for me, and I can't wait. I have these milestones in my business that I'm like, I am going to make sure my dad's at that party, right? Like to be there to
And
celebrate.
part of it is I wonder if he doesn't quite understand. Like he still thinks he's the dad and he's right and this is the way you should be versus you're giving him a different way, right? That it's all about positive emotion instead of, oh my gosh, the Grim Reaper and all the bad stuff that's going to happen.
Yeah, money doesn't have to be the boogeyman, right? Like it can be a good thing in your life too. And I think a lot of people can identify with that, right? Like many of us grew up in '08 or whatever it might have been, the financial crisis in the '80s. We've all seen it. Even COVID, we've seen it. And I think we feel the impact, or even our parents feel the impact of the Great Depression. Psychologists have found that the average person decides their money beliefs by age 7. And University of Cambridge found that the average person decides what they believe about money by age 7, which means most of our beliefs are whose?
Parents.
They're our parents. And where are their beliefs from?
Their parents.
Their parents, right?
Yeah, that's
And so one
really
of the most powerful things you can do as an adult is say, well, there's not that much I would trust my 7-year-old self to decide about. So maybe I could start to update and question, do I still identify with these beliefs? And you'll probably be surprised at how much smarter and more positive you are now, too.
Okay, I love that. So, do you have a number one workaround for us?
A number one workaround if you have ADHD would be set aside the time to do the hard thing. You're avoiding something hard with your money. Chances are, if you're listening to this right now, you have a financial goal, it's in your mind, and you think to yourself, I should do something else, right? It's like the classic ADHD thing of you have a test tomorrow and you decide today is the day to deep clean your closet. With your money, right? That might work. It's a little cute, but I would set aside time to do the hard thing because it's not going to be that hard. You can do it. You're smart as hell. You've done harder things before. So set aside the time to do it. And I think you're going to surprise yourself. I think that's the biggest workaround is that if you have ADHD, you're going to surprise yourself at how good at money you really can be.
Well, because you're anxious about it anyway. So, are you going to carry that anxiety all the way to the end of your life? And I think the hardest thing is literally making a decision. You make a decision, this is what I'm going to do, and you start putting the structures in place of how you're going to do it. And then the relief from that, right? That's all positive emotion. Just the fact that you made a decision and you're doing something. I love that. So, Nicole, thank you so much for spending time with us here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Tracy. I've been so excited for this.
Okay, so that's what I have for you for this week. If you like this episode with Nicole, please let us know by leaving a review. Our goal is to change the conversation around ADHD, helping as many women as we possibly can learn how their ADHD brains work so that they too may discover their amazing strengths. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you here next week.